This is a feature which you obviously will never have in reality, because normally the sun comes from one side. So for each one of these panoramas we shot for 1 year over the different seasons, we combined 120 photos for every single panorama, and that is what gives you this beautiful lit up quality of the 400 panoramas which constitute this approach on the temple. So you have all these panels which you can access one by one, and then you can also click the different details, bring them forward, or you can go into a narrated story. This is where we now speak to young people who don't have the patience, who don't want to treat this like an encyclopedia. We just click down here and we go into
12 years have passed since the Bodhisattva's initial decision to descend on earth has been made. And as the moment of his final incarnation approaches, the gods deliberate under which form the Bodhisattva should enter the womb of his future mother. Some of them suggest that best for him would be to assume a human form. Others plead for a divine shape. Or maybe the form of a Garuda. But ultimately, a consensus is reached that according to ancient tradition, best would be if he assumed the form of a magnificent white elephant. Having the presentiment that something wonderful is about to happen, the queen asks her husband, King Suddhodana, for his consent for her to retire to a special retreat of strict moral conduct and fasting. Only a few selected women of her closest entourage would be allowed to keep her company. Realizing that she is about to conceive, the radiantly beautiful young queen then retires to the airy upper apartments of the summer palace and reclines on a couch in the soft breeze. Such is the gracefulness of the young queen at this time, that the goddesses and nymphs secretly descend from the heavens to spy on Maya Devi's radiant state, a state which seems to justify the meaning of her name, Goddess of Illusion. At the same time, final arrangements are being made in Tushita heaven in preparation for the great being's descent to the earth, and among themselves, the divinities begin to compete about who would be allowed to accompany the Bodhisattva during his life on earth, remaining invisibly at his side during the trials of his final existence. At last, the moment for the future Buddha's final incarnation has arrived. As usual under such circumstances, all realms of the universe are violently shaken, and the 1 billion of Buddha worlds filling the vastness of space threaten to grind out of balance. Then the great being starts his descent to earth, surrounded by innumerable jubilant celestial beings who carry him in his sanctuary in triumph on their shoulders. As he descends, the Bodhisattva's body begins to emit a light so powerful as has never been seen before, a light so great that it illuminates every last corner of all universes.
So there are over 100 panels which are illustrated in this style, but let me introduce you to another feature in a completely different way, how you can explore the temple, namely by this feature, which lets you access directly every single panel of the Borobudur panel by panel. And as you see, when I'm moving my cursor here over the different fields, every single of the 1,460 panels of the Borobudur can be accessed one by one, and instantly, obviously. So it's a very, very fast way to get you to any point of the Borobudur, and we can go through the entire structure, and it will bring us to every single panel in the fraction of a second. For instance, this part when we go, when Prince Siddhartha is taking his leave from his father, we can go one by one after these different panels and look at them and look at the great departure of Lord Buddha, a very central episode when he took the leave and changed to, decided to change from his life as a spoiled prince to become a wandering ascetic monk.
Now that midnight has arrived, the hour of the Bodhisattva's great departure has finally come. Scores of heavenly beings appear in order to escort the Bodhisattva. They place the hooves of his horse, Kantaka, on spotless lotuses and lift them in the air, preventing them from making any noise. They open the heavily guarded city gates, and they lead him in triumph out of the city, which has fallen into a deep sleep. Vast trains of celestial beings attend Siddhartha on his nocturnal ride. It is said that the deities bore 80,000 torches in front and on each side of him when he crossed the Niranjana river. At dawn, Siddhartha and his following are already far away from his hometown, Kapilavastu. In a last effort, the protector deity of his hometown tries to convince Siddhartha to return to his kingdom, which otherwise would perish. Deprived of you, the city is filled with shadows and will become a wilderness. With your departure, the Shakyas are no longer a force on this earth. This breaks the lineage of the king. Pray look once more on your palace. For a last time, the prince takes a long, loving look on the city which was home to him and everything he cherished. I will not stand, sleep, or walk toward the city of Kapilavastu until I have obtained supreme enlightenment. With deep gratitude, the Bodhisattva dismisses the deities who've accompanied his great departure, as well as his servant Chandaka, whom he asks to take back his beloved horse Kantaka and to return his royal attires to his father. Siddhartha then reflects how unbecoming it would be for the wandering ascetic he intends to become to wear long hair, which is usually an attribute of nobility. He then cuts off his hair and throws it in the air. There it is collected by the gods and preserved in a heavenly stupa as a special relic to commemorate the Bodhisattva's renunciation of worldly life.
Well, so much for the very basics for people who have never heard about Buddha and his life and his teaching. But obviously we can go much, much further. So what is this Borobudur all about? Let me give you a very brief introduction for those who are not familiar with the Borobudur.
Legend has it that Neil Armstrong, when he set foot on the moon, spotted a strange glow emanating from a specific area on distant planet Earth. Upon closer examination, the area from where this light came from proved to be located in Southeast Asia. in Indonesia, in central Java, from a sacred place called the Borobudur. An ancient site plunged into a veil of unsolved mysteries. An area of convergence of ancient wisdom and modern scientific insight. A place so holy that it was singled out as one of the most sanctified spots on earth. The Borobudur, a place where man meets the divine within himself. Some see in it a representation of Mount Meru, which is at the center of the Buddhist universe. Others believe that its design follows the shape of the gigantic diamond world mandala, representing a sacred matrix along which the universe is conceived. From a present vantage point, the ground plan of the Borobudur could be seen as reminiscent of the layout of a computer chip, an integrated circuit with encoded instructions conceived to convey an ancient message of wisdom and compassion to a modern world in need.
So this metaphor of looking at the Borobudur like a computer chip in which a lot of information is encoded, like a blueprint which contains all the information, all the ways on how to become a good Buddhist, how to follow the path to enlightenment, is key to using this interactive tool, which is not only a tourist thing, but which is really a guiding tool on how to decipher, how to decode the Borobudur in each single facet of its different approaches. Take an example of the famous hidden base of the Borobudur. The Borobudur has still many, many mysteries, but one of the greatest and unsolved mysteries is the so-called hidden base, which is not visible any longer today, but which in this production we make for the first time completely accessible, not only by the panels, but also by their content and by their logic.
Buddhism postulates that for every cause there is an effect. Those who engage in wholesome, meritorious good actions will be rewarded with good karma, while those who initiate unwholesome, wrongful actions generate bad effects. Although a person committing the act may not immediately realize the results generated by his or her actions, the karmic effect will eventually play out, if not in this life, then in a future existence.
Can we actually make it darker in the room?
A total of 160 bas-reliefs illustrate the mechanics of this karmic principle on the Borobudur. They are hidden at the foot of the monument, covered by a large terrace which was added, presumably either to prevent the original structure from sagging, or, as some historians suppose, to hide the sometimes sensual content of these carvings from the sight of pious
all
Muslims
the hidden bases
who
of
replaced the original Buddhist community living around the
ancient
Borobudur.
holy scripture called the Mahakama Vibhanga, the law of cause and effect. And if we go on any of these panels, we can click on this panel and see what is the relation between cause and effect depicted in each one of these panels. And if we click on these panels, we can actually interactively study the relation between cause and effect. So this is a wonderful tool to study all these different causes and effects which constitute the Buddhist moral code of behavior and the law of cause and effect. And you can explore each one of these boxes and then see what these different hidden panels are all about and how they explain our karmic way, our journey through the karmic thing.
Which are the 10 negative deeds? Which is the bad deed which causes disunion with friends, family, and the entire environment?
So rolling over
The
and
bad
click.
action of the body which
Down.
consists in taking life.
Can we make it dark? Completely dark. Okay, that's better. Thank you. Yeah. So each one of these relations between cause and effect can be explored. This gives you a good example. About cause, rewards for offering a garland, and the effect, their eightfold rewards. And it is the first time that all these panels are linked to the original text. Normally, you see just photographs of these panels because
Which are the 10
you cannot see
negative
these panels
deeds?
in reality anymore. They're hidden. That's the whole story. Nobody knows why these panels have been hidden, but they are not accessible anymore. They are the basis of the Borobudur, and they have been recovered. Some people think this was to support the structure of the Borobudur, which was about to fall apart. Other people think this was because of Muslim behavior, which did not want to see some of the rather shocking depictions here. So in this program, for the first time, you can access all the different panels and go in their logic
Which is the
and see
negative deed?
how they behave. But we can obviously go much further because the Borobudur is a teaching tool, and if we go into this path of the initiated, we can go much more into detail. Obviously, there's the very basic things, which are...
The sacred geometry of the Borobudur mandala is laid out in such a way that one could easily use it as a teaching tool for the 3 of the fundamental pillars of the Buddhist belief system: the 4 noble truths, the noble eightfold path, and the 12 links which constitute the wheel of becoming at the source of dependent origination.
So you can go into each one of these sections and then find out about what the fundamentals of Buddhist teaching are about. You can go into the 4 noble truths. You can go into the Noble Eightfold Path in all its details and find out what the different teachings of Lord Buddha about right speech, about the Eightfold Paths were. And you can go into dependent origination, which is obviously much more complicated.
The process of origination of all suffering, corresponding to the second noble truth, can be understood as a chain reaction of cause and effect, if the 12 constituting factors of dependent origination are linked in a forward mode. With ignorance as condition, volitional impulses arise. These lead to consciousness, which conditions name and form. With name and form as condition.
So you can go into all these different states of dependent origination, and you can also follow the Buddhist process of logic going back and forward between these different stages of dependent origination.
Dependent on volitional impulses, consciousness arises. If volitional impulses cease, consciousness does not arise.
So we have the entire forward and backward logic of dependent origination.
Consciousness is conditioned by volitional impulses. If volitional impulses cease, consciousness does not arise.
So you can see how you can use this tool as a teaching tool to convey basically basic Buddhist teachings, but it goes obviously much further than that. And we can, for instance, go here into the different aspects which make the Borobudur so special. We can consider it a Tipitaka for the illiterate, for instance. We can look into the structure of the
Like the
Borobudur.
architecture of an integrated circuit, the conception of the Borobudur adds layer upon layer on top of each other in order to achieve an overall set of components containing instructions on how to reach the ideal of bodhisattvahood. The classical approach to view the vertical structure of the Borobudur consists in seeing in it a representation of the Buddhist universe, which is divided into three realms. Kamadhatu, the sphere where man is controlled by his desires and entangled in his karmic struggle. Rupadhatu, the middle part of the universe, the sphere of forms where man has abandoned his desires, but is still wrapped in the richness of names, the designating, and forms, the designated. And Arupadhatu, the sphere of formlessness, the highest part of the universe, where man is once and forever freed from all bonds with the world of phenomenons.
You
It
can
is
see how the
fascinating
same
to
structure
see
is
which
used
highly
to represent
integrative
the three
approach
schools
the
of
builders
Buddhism.
of the Borobudur took by paying simultaneously respect to each one of the three great schools of Buddhism. The elder school of Theravada is honored by the illustration of some of the most respectable scriptures contained in the traditional Tripitaka canon, the Jatakas, as well as by the extensive treatment of the life of Buddha Shakyamuni according to the Lalita Vistara, which had emanated from the Sarvastivada school, an offshoot of Theravada tradition. The great vehicle of Mahayana Buddhism is revered by consecrating a major part of reliefs, as well as the overall decorative concept of the temple to the Avatamsaka Sutra, the flower garland scripture, one of the principal texts of the school of thought. And Vairajana Buddhism is celebrated by the overall layout of the temple in the form of a three-dimensional mandala, reminding us of the sacred rituals of the Kalachakra mandala and Tibetan Buddhism. In an absolutely brilliant architectural layout solution, the Borobudur manages thus to encode some sort of a unified field theory of Buddhism by pointing simultaneously at three of the most fundamental concepts taught by Lord Buddha, the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, and the mechanics of dependent origination, while at the same time paying homage to the five great transcendental Buddhas.
Let me show you some of the more hidden aspects of the Borobudur which make its real great beauty. Those of you who have been on the Borobudur may have noticed that it's covered over and over with flower ornaments. At the beginning, your attention is not so much attracted by these because they seem like the frames surrounding the stories. But when you go deeper into that, you realize that why these flowers are there. Well, because terraces 2, 3, and 4 of the Borobudur are relating to the Avatamsaka Sutra, which is the flower garland sutra. And one realizes that all these flowers have a profound meaning in terms of a grammar, in terms of a vocabulary, which is meant to separate all these different messages. So we can go into that one, for instance.
A considerable number of the bas-reliefs of the Borobudur are based on the visualization of the Avatamsaka Sutra, the flower ornament scripture. But if it is the text which has inspired the visual language of the temple, it is the endless decorative vocabulary of flowery ornaments, garlands, flower crowns, necklaces, bracelets, vases, and showers of flowers which translate into the actual grammar and punctuation of the temple. creating the rhythm which separates panel from panel as if the bas-reliefs were stanzas or verses, allocating to each flower the function of a specific wholesome action, such as a good intentional impulse, a practice, an attitude, or an accomplishment.
What is the relevance to the present? Let's go into the decoding process of the Borobudur.
Various attempts of interpretation have been undertaken to explain the function of the Borobudur, ranging from the representation of the holy mountain of Buddhism, Mount Meru, to being a giant stupa. However, the combination of a mandala-like layout with an extremely rich visual content which ranges from historical narratives to initiation formulas and meditative instructions, all clad in the dramatic form of encounters between man and the divine, leads us to assume that a much more ambitious plan was pursued with the construction of the Borobudur. Situated at the intersection between religious spirituality, psychology, and information transfer technology at an early stage, the Borobudur can be considered from a present vantage point as the attempt to be a comprehensive blueprint, a set of instructions conceived to enable access to a higher self, which encompasses the Buddhist ideals of renunciation and universal compassion. Modern computational concepts such as random access memory are built into the many layers of this mnemonic palace, with its almost 2,000 randomly accessible memorizers in the form of carved stone panels, which remind us in their layout of a highly integrated circuit.
One of the profound mysteries for me, when you spend years and years on the Borobudur, you ask really yourself, what is the profound, what is the deep meaning behind this building? Was revealed to me when I followed the journey of young Sudana, a young man who goes over 3 terraces of the temple through hundreds of panels on his way for enlightenment. And at one point, he is introduced by Maitreya, the Buddha of the future, to the Tower of Vairochana. And let me show you this insight I got. We spoke this morning about insights, what this Tower of Vairochana could mean in relation to the Borobudur.
With a single snap of his finger, like when you awake somebody's attention to an instant of profound insight, Maitreya opens the doors of Vairochana's tower, enabling Sudana to enter into the realm of the supreme embodiment of Buddhahood. What Sudana perceives at first inside of this tower is a sheer infinity of other towers. Could it be that this very moment of profound spiritual insight carries the key to the hidden meaning of the Borobudur? Could it be that the Borobudur itself is nothing but the symbolical representation of Vairochana's tower, a portal which constitutes the threshold between infinity and the realm of reality such as we experience it with our senses?
So, one of the mysteries of the Borobudur and why it was constructed may lay in this parallel to Vairochana's tower. That's what I tried to explore in this feature here. Let me go to a completely different aspect, which seems to me very, very important, which is the chapter of the Pilgrim's Path. There are 10, as a monk or as a visitor, as a spiritual visitor of the Borobudur, you're supposed to circumambulate the temple 10 times in order to reach to the top in a progressive way. And in order to use this tool, this interactive tool we have created, we have created here some kind of an instruction which allows you to understand how to proceed as a pilgrim. When you come as a pilgrim, how to go to the different terraces and explore the different galleries in the proper way, so you can properly access and meaningful go along all these different panels without losing yourself.
in a transition between the Lalita Vistara, the life of the Buddha, as it was depicted on the first gallery, and the second grand theme, to which the majority of the remaining panels of the upper square galleries of the Borobudur are dedicated, namely the depiction of an ancient text called the Ganda Vyuha. The pilgrim is invited to execute his first circumambulation of the second gallery, looking to his left side. Here he is confronted with additional scenes from the Jatakas and Avadanas, moving forward along them by pressing the arrow pointing to the left. However, the bas-reliefs of this section are rather poorly preserved.
So let's see, let's take the role of a digital pilgrim, of a virtual pilgrim, and proceed directly, as just indicated, to the second gallery, where we are dealing with a completely different topic. We are now beyond the life of the Buddha. We are in a later period. We are in the period of Mahayana Buddhism. And it's very interesting how the Borobudur approaches this section, because it postulates, well, not everybody has, in Buddha's original teaching, asked by the Buddha, the force to pull himself out. Mahayana Buddhism, as you all know, is about having bodhisattvas coming in and helping you, and is about the ideal of enlightenment. So the metaphor the Borobudur chooses is the metaphor of a young man who goes and sets out to find enlightenment. How does he go about this? He asks a bodhisattva, Manjusri, what do I have to do in order to reach enlightenment? So Manjusri points him first to one teacher, and this becomes like a consecutive visit to 53 different teachers whom this young man has to visit, who each one of them imparts his wisdom to the young man. And again, here you have this very interesting structure, because these visits to the 53 teachers are repeated twice, so we have really an information structure here which is highly interactive and which allows you to access each one of these visits and go into a dialogue between Sudana and his teacher. Sudana, this is the young man, asking each time,
how does an enlightening being preserve the determination for enlightenment?
Then you can go into the teacher's answer.
I know the speech of all kinds of beings in a billion-world universe.
But you can also go, and this has been done for the first time, you can relate each single panel to the scripture and then go much more into detail into the different Buddhist concepts of Mahayana Buddhism in this case, in the 10 directions, the Buddha lands, all that. So again, it's a teaching tool for the different aspects which are conveyed by the old sutras. And again, it's for the first time that image and text have been brought together in a single medium here. And you can see how far this is going to take you. We can progress with Sudana through 3 terraces into a more and more enlightened state, and we can meet the different teachers, we can go into their prayers, we can go into the realm of Maitreya, the Buddha of the future, and explore it in great detail by going to these chambers of jewels, of spiritual jewels, which are bestowed on the seeker. And each one of these states is explored. I think you can easily see why it would take weeks to explore this entire program. As a matter of fact, it's probably, if you want to go through all the aspects, it would take you 2 weeks. This is why I can only show you very, very brief aspects here. But let me conclude by one aspect which seems to me very, very important. It's in this chapter, which is dedicated basically to the history of the Borobudur, and you can again go through the different periods of the Borobudur, when it
The
was
origins
built,
of the
when it was
Borobudur and its
rediscovered.
original purpose are shrouded in mystery. A highly controversial hypothesis emitted by the Dutch painter Nieuwenkamp proposed that the Borobudur was originally sitting amidst a large surface of water, symbolizing.
So I will not go through all these episodes, but I want to focus on another aspect which is very, very essential, and explain why in a second. When we go to this chapter here, which is called a place where man meets the divine within himself, it is important to understand that the Borobudur is located at the center of a zone of approximately 50 kilometers, and within this zone, each one of the great religions has manifested itself in an amazing way. Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and that makes really the beauty of the place.
A place where man meets the divine within himself. Apparently, the Borobudur is located at the heart of a quite unique spiritual energy field of extreme intensity, which has permitted each of the major religions present in Java to proliferate with quite unique accomplishments within a radius of some 50 kilometers from the temple.
So you can go to each one of these aspects and see how within 50 kilometers each one religion has manifested
has erected
itself.
Here the magnificent temple complex of Prambanan. Within only a few kilometers from the Borobudur, Christian, and namely Catholic faith possesses in the little town of Muntilan, with its old Jesuit tradition, one of its most prolific centers, which has generated more bishops than any other city except Florence in Italy. And while a benevolent virgin attracts countless devout Catholic pilgrims to the miraculous source of Sedang Sona,
obviously Buddhism, but also Islam.
Devout Muslims, who replaced the Buddhists of Central Java as the predominant religious majority, have surrounded the ancient site of the Borobudur with a dense network of not less than 300 musholas, Muslim prayer rooms, and mosques. And places such as the Islamic school of Pondok Mabalan have become a model for the propagation of enlightened and tolerant Islam. Not to speak of the Brotherhood's devout followers of the Prophet, which keep the flame of his faith alive around the temple through.
I'm emphasizing this particular part because this is really the great message of the Borobudur beyond just being the largest Buddhist monument in the world. The important message of the Borobudur, as I said in my opening remarks, is that the Borobudur is not only a place where man can meet the divine within himself, it is that the Borobudur is a symbol for universal tolerance and a place where really all the different religions and the different aspects how to access to the higher self and to the sublime teachings can be united. And it is very remarkable, I think, that it was possible to create a project like this in a predominantly Muslim country. As you know, Indonesia is a Muslim country, and yet the government of Indonesia spent over $2 million to make this project. So it is a first aspect of tolerance. However, now that the project is finished, I'm afraid that the government of Indonesia, the people who produced this project, are a little bit afraid about what they did themselves and said, oh, this is about Buddhism, we don't want to propagate this. And this is why I would like to appeal to you here today. We spoke in the morning about ASEAN coming together, the Buddhist countries of Southeast Asia and Asia coming together. I think now that we were able to produce this project in all its beauty and all its richness, it is very, very important to keep the possibilities to work with the material. I see this product, which I have just been presenting to you, not as an end product, but as a beginning product. We have over 20,000 pictures of the Borobudur. We have 400 different panoramas. We have hundreds and thousands of pages of text, which we all have in databases. There is enough material to work for years for publications to spread the Dharma, to spread Buddhism in a multimedia world, but it will certainly not happen under the auspices of an Islamic government, which is now a little bit resenting this whole thing. So I need your help, and I suggest that we use this conference to maybe set up a working group to brainstorm how can the message of the Borobudur, which we have started to encode, which we have started to record here, how can this be brought to further use, to continuous use for the next generations, to bring Buddhism through the means of interactive media to the world. So after this pledge, let me just finish with the last shot, which is from a very beautiful celebration, which is done every year around Vaisak at the Borobudur. It's a fire ritual, which this time is coming from Tibetan monks which come there, namely from Lama Gangshan, who is a famous Tibetan Lama, who comes every year with his Italian followers to the Borobudur to celebrate the great candle ceremony. Well, 4 years in the making, ladies and gentlemen, please accept Borobudur-Paths to Enlightenment as a humble contribution on how to spread Buddhism and the Dharma through the means of multimedia to the entire world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed to you as well, Professor Titus Leber there, a world-class multimedia